I think that's the other thing with POI. I think we sometimes dismiss the taboo and stigma still around infertility, and it's such a big thing. And with children, I was always kind of like, maybe I'll have children one day, but I don't know. And then my career kind of took over for a bit, and then I was always a bit on the fence. But for a woman who maybe that's been your goal for a long time and that's what you really want, for them to have that taken away is such an identity stuck on your identity. And also, if people are putting so much emphasis on you being a mum and that's your only purpose or that's what you should be doing, to then take that away from someone is just, it destroys your life. So I think all of the stigma around that is something that we need to talk about it more, so we can try and break that down. But I think we underestimate, like, the people aren't going to want to talk about POI, because if you say you're infertile, that for so many people it's just such a horrible, like, they don't want people to know, they don't want to share that, because it's like, soul destroying for so many people.
Premature Ovarian Insufficiency, POI, isn't just a medical diagnosis, it's a life-altering reality. For Dr. Siobhan O'Sullivan, a plastic surgery registrar with the NHS, it came at 31, reshaping her future in ways she never expected. My Life on Pause is her story of navigating the emotional, physical, and social challenges of POI, grappling with identity, relationships, and uncertainty. But it's also a story of resilience, finding joy in the small moments, and proving that a diagnosis doesn't define you. Today, we're diving into her journey and what POI really is, its impact, its challenges, and what everyone should know. But before we dive in, I have a quick 60-second favor to ask, and that's to subscribe to this podcast and sign up for the 51% community on our website. It's free and makes a huge difference, helping us bring even more incredible guests and host impactful events for our community. And finally, a quick but important note. The views shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. They don't replace professional, medical, or financial advice, so always consult a qualified expert for personalised guidance. Siobhan, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on. I would really love for you to talk a little bit about who you are and your journey from what you were doing to what you're doing now. And of course, I know this podcast is about your personalised journey with POI. And also, given that you're a doctor, it's a combined, you know a lot about medicine and POI yourself. So it's great to have you on. Thank you so much.
So my name's Siobhan. I'm now 37, but when I was 31, I was diagnosed with POI, which is Premature Ovarian Insufficiency. And it was quite a surprise diagnosis. I found out I'd come to the end of a 7-year relationship at the time, and I'd just come off the pill just because that kind of didn't really need it at the time. And it was when I came off the combined contraceptive pill that I started getting some hot flushes and symptoms that were a little bit strange. And I think at first I just put it down to the fact that I'd come off the pill and thought that, it's probably my hormones are everywhere. So didn't think too much of it. But it was in the middle of winter and I was getting the train down to my GP placement in the depths of Surrey. And it got to the point where I was like kind of dripping in sweat on the train and having to like strip off, and I couldn't like tolerate the coffee. And it got to the point where it was happening every day. And I was like, this is a bit abnormal. So I spoke to the GP, went and got some blood tests. And then I remember getting a call from he sounded like quite a young GP, and I was on my placement at the time, and he didn't sound very sure of anything, but he was like, oh, you've got some abnormal results, like we should probably get some more blood tests. And that was kind of it. And I didn't really think too much of it. But then a few weeks later, I was having a smear test, and I had a kind of more senior female GP, and she looked at me and she looked quite concerned and was like, oh, are you aware of your blood results? I was like, oh yeah, just, going to get some more. And she was like, no, I'm actually quite concerned about these. I think that, you might have gone through an early menopause. And that kind of, that kind of struck me, you just don't really know what to, but also I was suppose I was having my smear test, so I was a bit not really in the right frame of mind. And she's like, I'm going to refer you to the, the ovarian failure clinic, and we'll get you into this. So it all kind of happened quite quickly, almost for me, like with the symptoms, diagnosis, and everything. And then I was referred to a specialist, but then the wait list was so long. I think there were 8 months or something, 7 to 8 months to see somebody.
Wow.
And obviously by that point, I had a little bit of medical knowledge. I knew menopause was not probably great at my age, and I started kind of Googling things, and then you start worrying about things like fertility. So then I ended up paying to see somebody privately for one consultation, just so that I could try and get some answers and see what was going on. So I did a few locums to try and save up for that. But it was, so I went to see somebody privately, and he was honestly one of the kindest doctors that I've ever like come into. He was so kind, so sweet. And I went to see him, and he basically said, we don't need any more tests. I can see from your blood results that you've gone through the menopause, and you've probably got POI. So we can do a few more blood tests to look for causes. We can scan your ovaries to see if there's anything there and what's going on there. And then, but that's it. And then to be fair, he was really good, because he was like, to be honest, there's no point in you doing anything else privately, because we've almost missed the boat. He didn't say it probably so bluntly. He was just like, so, get referred to see me in the NHS, and we can kind of do all the tests and the investigations through the NHS, because I think he was aware that I was worried about kind of a timeline and doing that. So I think we did one blood test just to see if there were any eggs left, and that came back the next day, and there weren't. It said there was very low reserve or no reserve. And at that point he was like, well, I don't want you may as well just come and see me in the NHS, so get referred. So I did. I suppose I should say what premature ovarian insufficiency is, for any listeners.
I was going to ask you exactly that. What exactly is POI?
Yeah, so POI is when your ovaries stop working properly. So you've got depleted levels of estrogen, and you're not producing kind of the eggs that you need, and you end up going into an early menopause as a result of this. So I think that some people with POI don't like it being associated with early menopause, because they like to say it's a distinct condition, and I do completely support that idea. But for me, I think early menopause is part of it. So I think it's it's all a bit blurred into one. So your ovaries stop working before the age of 40, and then you go through an early menopause, and that's kind of what it is.
Can you develop POI after 40, or is it something that only happens before 40?
Yeah, so I think it's defined as under 40. So when you go through amenorrhea, so your periods stop under the age of 40. I think I think once you're above 40, it starts being counted more as like early, like premature menopause. Yeah. So again, the lines get a bit blurred, but like 45 is counted as, I think, early menopause. Under 45 is probably premature menopause, but POI I think is normally for women under the age of 40.
Yeah. So with POI, you mentioned it's linked with the menopause, right? Is that for everyone? So if you have POI, you're going to go through the menopause earlier than obviously the normal timeline.
Yeah. So if you have POI, then you will go through an early menopause. So you kind of go through all, and the menopause symptoms obviously vary very much from person to person, patient to patient. Every woman who's gone through the menopause has probably experienced kind of different symptoms compared to other people. And I think that's similar with POI. Like, people will experience things in different ways. There's the fertility side again as well with POI, because obviously with it means that your fertility is reduced. I was kind of infertile when I was diagnosed. So as I said, there was tests and there were no eggs left, and they looked at my ovaries and there were no kind of eggs in there. But for some women, that's not the case. They just have maybe like a reduced fertility. And there are the statistics, I think, which say that 25% of I'm going to probably get these statistics a bit wrong, but I think 25% of ladies with POI can kind of go back into ovulation, and 10% of those can get pregnant spontaneously.
Oh, wow.
There
Okay.
is a very, very, very small chance that
Mm.
that your fertility will return and you can flip back into fertility with POI, but it's very, very small.
Yeah.
And that's the reason. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about kind of treatment options and things, but that was the reason that when I got diagnosed, even though they'd done the tests and they found that I had no eggs left and was most likely infertile, at the same time, I was in a position where I'd just come out of a long-term relationship. I was faced with this like horrific diagnosis. I was trying to deal with quite a lot. And we did have to have a conversation with the doctor about contraception. Uh,
Mm.
and with that, I ended up having the Mirena coil implanted because I almost couldn't take the risk that I would become pregnant accidentally if it wasn't in the right circumstance, because the thought of then having to make some of those decisions on the top of that was just like,
Yeah.
yeah. So there is the chance that you can kind of fluctuate back in, but
Mm.
it's quite a small chance. I think only 10% as well.
Yeah. So if I rewind a little bit, you mentioned that, you were on the combined pill.
Yeah.
So because you were on the combined pill for quite a long time,
Yeah.
did that mask the symptoms of POI?
Yeah, it is exactly that. And I think there's a lot of people who get a bit worried that the pill might cause POI for whatever reason, but
Right.
it's not, that isn't the case. It's just the fact that the pill is a treatment for POI because it's giving you estrogen when you're deplete. So the
Right.
two kind of, you need hormone replacement when you've got POI, and the two options, I think there's a study at the moment going on actually called the POISE study, POISE, and that's kind of comparing the oral contraceptive, so combined contraceptive, with traditional HRT and seeing if there's any difference,
Mm.
which one's better kind of to treat it, and if there's any difference. But yeah, it's exactly that, the fact that I was almost treating myself without realizing it. So as soon as I stopped my treatment, then that's when all the symptoms kind of returned.
Mm. Do you think before you went on the combined pill, there were any indication I mean, what are the classic symptoms of POI if you're not taking the combined pill, so obviously
Yeah.
you're able to have the symptoms. What are the classic symptoms, and are the symptoms, do they vary from woman to woman? Because like the menopause,
Yeah.
obviously there's probably, hundreds of symptoms for that women go through when they're going through perimenopause, menopause. Is that similar with POI as
Yeah,
well?
no, it's definitely, and the symptoms are, again, it's kind of a bit, it does blur a bit with menopause because the symptoms are all related to low estrogen. So you've got the low estrogen symptoms that you'd get with menopause, because like the hot flushes, the dry kind of vagina, recurrent UTIs, recurrent thrush. So you've got all of those symptoms. The additional risk with POI is particularly around kind of heart health and bone health, because
Mhm.
you've got this reduction in estrogen earlier on in life, and estrogen's protective for the bones and protective for the heart. So I think almost the biggest risk for women with POI who go untreated for a long time is probably actually they can be damaging their bones and their heart without realizing it. Because you assume probably when you're a bit younger that these things are a given, and that you're just healthy and you don't have to worry about these things as much.
Mm.
But actually, estrogen plays a big part in that as well.
Yeah. What's the earliest age you think you can get POI?
So there's people can get it in their teens, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's lots of incredible women that I've met since I've been diagnosed who did go through it
Mm.
when they were teenagers. And I think that in itself is such a difficult time to, I mean, any age that you are diagnosed is difficult. And I think that
Mm.
different ages, you've almost got different difficulties and different things to grasp. But when you're a teenager and all your friends are having periods and then you're not starting your periods, I think that must be, and it must be quite hard for your identity and just trying to figure out all who you are as a person. And
Yeah.
people can be diagnosed with POI in their teenage years. I think the statistics are about 1 in 100 under 40. which now they're saying might even be something like 4 in 100. So it's
Right.
1 in 1,000 under 30 and 1 in 100,000 under 20. But they're not small numbers. I mean, I think I saw a statistic the other day that said that there's at least 600,000 people in the UK with POI. So that's quite a lot of women who've got this condition that nobody knows anything about, and
Yeah.
including healthcare professionals. So I think it definitely does need to kind of be talked about a bit more.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think I read today that the wait list to see a gynecologist is through the roof. I mean, it's crazy. So to even get diagnosed, and I know you're on that wait list for months, but you were fortunate enough you saved up just to go and see one person once privately.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And I think it's really hard. I think especially with the diagnosis, it's hard because a lot of healthcare professionals don't know about it. Like, I was at medical school for 5 years and we never learnt about this. I mean, we didn't even really talk about the menopause, but we definitely didn't talk about POI. So this is that even as a doctor, when I got diagnosed, I was like, what's that? So it's not something that a lot of healthcare professionals know about. So if they don't know about it, then even if you're going to them with some of the symptoms, they don't know to look for it. And I think it's really hard, because I think you see, especially on social media, and you see a lot of anger directed towards kind of particularly GPs and people for missing things and not doing things. And I think I can understand people's frustrations, because you want the people that you trust with your healthcare to, have the knowledge and be there. But I mean, a lot of my friends who are now GPs, since I've been diagnosed and now they know about it, they've like even gone on courses themselves or done reading about the menopause and the early menopause and about POI specifically. They want to know about it. I think most people do want to help. It's just that if the knowledge isn't out there, then they can't help, which is why I think it's really important, again, to have these conversations just so that it's out there and people know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, the more we can, the more people we can reach with this information, the better, really. And that includes, healthcare professionals as well, because, like you say, we can blame the GPs and the NHS and things like that. But if you're not, when you're at medical school and you're not taught something, you can't possibly know about it. When you go into practice, how can you know about it? So if they hear it from somewhere else, like your colleagues have from you, they're aware of it. And if someone does come in with similar symptoms, they can maybe address that and think, hold on, this sounds similar to what Siobhan had. Let's investigate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of, we talked about the symptoms. Now, I'm assuming the symptoms for a teenager all the way up to, someone in their early 40s are similar. And obviously we talked about, they're kind of mixed up with the menopause symptoms. Now, if you're a teenager to someone, whether you're in your 30s or 40s, are the treatment options the same? And the earlier you can get, the earlier it's identified that you have POI, can it lead to better outcomes, basically? And what are those better outcomes?
Yeah, definitely. I think in particular, like I mentioned, the bone health and the heart health, and I think because it's a condition that not many people know about, it could be quite hard sometimes for people to find people to talk to who've got it or who are aware, which is why actually I was quite against social media when I first kind of started out and was a bit skeptical. I was like, how can you bond with people on who you don't know, and this is official? But actually you do connect with a lot of incredible people sometimes through social media, and then at events, and you hear their stories. And there's some women out there who were misdiagnosed or hadn't had the help for a long time and have developed things like heart failure, which is when your heart stops working, and now they're on medications to try and help the heart work. And these are women in their kind of 30s and 40s, which is crazy. And also women who have ended up getting osteoporosis, which is where your bones weaken, and you're more kind of susceptible to things like fractures. So they're women who didn't get the treatment early enough and couldn't start on the HRT to help keep the levels of estrogen high. So I think it's really important to get a diagnosis early, stop some of the longer term effects, and also you can try and modify your life a little bit, like menopause, weight gain and all of that kind of thing. That's a massive issue, like the impact of weight on hormones and your cardiovascular fit is just so if you can, it sounds silly, but when you can get away with a lot more, can't you, when you're younger, and you can eat rubbish food, you can kind of abuse your body a bit and you bounce back. But I think the difficulty is when you've got something like POI, you don't have that kind of safety net anymore. Maybe just need to watch what you're eating a bit and make sure you're exercising. And I mean, I'm terrible at the moment because work is just like, work can be a nightmare. We're doing long hours, you're grabbing food when you want. I don't have time to exercise because I'm in at 7 in the morning and then I'm too tired at night. So I know, and then I forget to take my HRT on time. So I know that my lifestyle at the moment is really bad, and I keep trying to do things to make it better. But again, I think sometimes when you're younger, you're a bit naive and you still think you're invincible, and it's hard to, if there's no physical thing on the outside, then it's hard to sometimes take it as seriously. And I know I'm really guilty of that, and I get really annoyed with myself for it. But I'm just like, I do need to take these things more seriously, because otherwise I'm going to end it up in a position where I've not done this to myself, but I've not helped myself when I should. So I definitely, sorry, I've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent, but I definitely think that an earlier diagnosis can help you prevent some of the long-term complications. And the main treatment is HRT, so replacing those hormones. And yes, if you've got any of the complications of heart failure and things, you might need some additional medications, but calcium and vitamin D for your bone health. So I'm trying to take calcium supplements every day now, alongside the HRT. And there's different kind of forms of HRT you can take. So you definitely need your estrogen, but you also might need progesterone to kind of boost that. And I've recently started testosterone, which is supposed to help with the brain fog and kind of tiredness. And also sometimes when women go through the menopause, say they've kind of got a low libido or a low sex drive, it can also help with that apparently as well. So there's lots of different types of hormones you can take depending on what symptoms you're getting.
Yeah, so I guess with POI, the only treatment is HRT.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So just replacing the hormones that you've not got, really. And
is that the same for teenagers as well?
Yeah. So they need to start. So they'll just need to start HRT a bit younger, which is a long time to be on hormone replacement. And I think people do get worried about that as well. They're worried that being on hormone replacement will put them at increased risk for things like breast cancer. But with POI, because you haven't got the right amounts of estrogen, if you're replaced with the hormones, your risk is the same as anyone at your age who isn't taking it, because you're not giving yourself extra, if that makes sense. So you're at any increased risk than somebody who is your age who hasn't got POI.
Yeah. So in terms of, you talk about HRT and things like that, but with fertility, now you mentioned that if you have POI, it's obviously directly linked to fertility. Is that the same for teenagers or people that are younger and it's diagnosed younger? Or is the percentage, you mentioned 25% chance that, you could be fertile. Is that the same when you're younger, or is that just kind of blanket?
So I'm not sure how that translates with, because again, there's really not much information evidence out there with POI. So a lot of there's a few papers that you can read, and full disclosure, I'm not a POI kind of gynae specialist at all. I work kind of in a different area of medicine, so I don't know enough details about kind of those specifics, but I think it is quite difficult to find all of that information because there's so little out there. But there's different fertility options for women with POI. If they aren't if they want to have children and don't end up kind of having a spontaneous pregnancy, you can look towards egg donation,
Yeah.
where you look for donor eggs and then kind of go down the IVF route, but with donor eggs. And then there's also adoption. And there's help out there to kind of explore those options for women. They can kind of put you in touch with fertility specialists and things. But it's just, I suppose we're at a time now where the whole concept of family is kind of ever expanding and changing, which I think's incredible. It's like, I think, a beautiful thing that you haven't got this
Yeah.
kind of, oh, you need a mum, you need a dad, and that's what a family is. I think that is nice.
And now it's a dog as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're in a time when people are accepting of families in all different kinds of ways, which is incredible. But I know people do struggle with the idea that it's not their egg. And yeah, it's a challenging one, because it's not a straightforward thing, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's decisions being thrust on you that you maybe didn't think you'd have to worry about. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And I guess it has it can have a huge impact on mental health as well. Were there challenges around that?
Yeah, so I think it's hard as well, because I think when I found out, I definitely blocked it out for quite a time, because I think because I'd just come out of a 7-year relationship, I was kind of a little bit more kind of preoccupied on that, and I was trying to rebuild my life from that aspect, like living on my
Yeah.
own and things. And I think I remember the specialist gave me a book called Making Friends with the Menopause, and I was like, absolutely not. I didn't, and I was very much in that kind of mind of like, I didn't ask for this. I don't want to accept it. I don't need to. And I kind of put the book in a box for quite a few years. And it was only when I got COVID, like 3 years later, and was forced to isolate by myself for 10 days. And then I found that book and got it out and then started reading it. I was like, okay, maybe there's actually a bit more to this. It's not just about, I suppose, menopause. I didn't really know what menopause was. I just assumed it was, I don't know, something you didn't need to worry about. And then I started reading about like bone health, heart health, like all the other things. And it made me think a bit about maybe like my 20s and what I'd been going through, and kind of drawing some like connections to that. And that was when I kind of started writing my own thoughts down. And I ended up writing a book at that point called My Life on Pause, just because there was nothing out there when I was diagnosed that was kind of touching on the things that I was bothered about, if that makes sense. Everyone kind of talks to you about fertility and pushes you on that side, but at that point I wasn't really like thinking about having children, and there were so many other things that I was more worried about, like dating, and like just you kind of have a disconnect with your own body and you feel a bit betrayed. So there was so much other stuff that nobody was talking about, and that's why I kind of just wanted to have some of those conversations, just in case anybody else was feeling the way that I'd felt with that. So it's such a complex issue. And I think the thing with I think when you're a bit younger and you've got so much other thing, you're trying to start out your career, you're trying to figure out who you are as a person, you're trying to find a partner maybe, or you're trying to navigate friendships, and there's so much other stuff and noise going on around you. It's just it can be really like difficult, I think, challenging to try and navigate it all with something like POI in the background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you talk about, you wrote a book. Can you talk a bit about that? I know it's about your journey. And
so it is, it's just, again, it's not the longest of books, but it was just something that I want, because there was nothing out there when I got diagnosed. And again, you get thrust into this like, well, do you want to have a baby? No. Okay, you're not in a relationship and that's not a priority at the moment. Okay, well, then no one really knows what to do with you. They just start you on some HRT, and then it's like, well, come back in a few years if you decide you want to have children, kind of thing. And there's just so much other stuff going on. And I just wanted to I started writing some thoughts down on like a blog. And then my mum was like, oh, I think this is quite good. I think you should maybe like make this into something more. So I just put some thoughts down, and yeah, and it came out as a book. So it's I don't know. It's quite nice. Some people have like reached out from kind of Central America and Spain and stuff, and places where I hadn't even realized people would have got hold of the book. So that's quite nice as well. And I think that's the other thing with POI. I think I think we sometimes dismiss the taboo and stigma still around infertility, and
Mm.
it's such a big thing. And there are probably so many women who are going through this but don't feel that they can talk about it and don't feel that they can share it, and are completely devastated by a diagnosis like this. Because if again, I've never, with children, I was always kind of like, maybe I'll have children one day, but I don't know. And then my career kind of took over for a bit, and then I was always a bit on the fence. But for a woman who maybe that's been your goal for a long time and that's what you really want, for them to have that taken away is such an identity,
Mm.
stuck on your identity. And also, again, it's different different cultures and different places. Like if people are putting so much emphasis on you being a mum and that's your only purpose, or that's what you should be doing, to then take that away from someone is just, it destroys your life. So I think
Yeah.
all of the stigma around that is something that we need to try and want to talk about it more, so we can try and break that down. But I think we underestimate, like, the people aren't going to want to talk about POI, because if you say you're infertile, that for so many people it's just such a horrible, like, they don't want people to know, they don't want to share that,
Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, soul destroying for so many people. So I think you're trying to work with that as well, and it's just, yeah, it's quite complex.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. It's a very personal, it's personal, and everyone's different. Some people want to openly talk about it like you have.
Yeah.
Some people, and I assume, like you said, it took you some time to
Yeah.
process and then think, I want to talk about it and I want to be a bit more open about it.
Yeah.
And then there's cultural things as well involved. It's a taboo
Yeah.
if fertility, and then being constantly bombarded with, typically in some cultures it's a case of, you get an education, you find a partner, get married, and then you have a child, and then you're asked, are you
Yeah.
getting married? Then you get married, and then the next question is, when are you having your baby? And
Yeah.
then, and these things, it's really difficult to manage, especially if you have POI. And to be fair, I had never come across POI. I'd never heard about it at all.
No. And
And
I am some depending on what mood I'm, and I do judge it, because I think, so my reason for speaking out was mainly because I, like, for so long I felt broken and I felt like ashamed and broken. I was like, how am I going to change that feeling if we don't like, I need to change that. We need to change how people see all of this. So that's, I think that's where kind of my speaking out came. And depending now, if people, like, if I'm in a, because people always, you're a woman of a certain age and, oh, do you have kids? When are you having kids? When are this? And depending on the situation, sometimes I do push back a bit now, and I'll be like, oh, actually, no, I can't have kids, or like, I can't, because I think everyone just comes out with it so naturally, and it's
yeah,
all those things as well, like the fact that it's just a common common question to ask. So it's quite a personal thing, but people just ask it, and then that makes you feel less of a person. It makes you feel like you're not fitting with society, that you're broken some way. So I just, sometimes I'll push back. Obviously I don't want people to feel awkward, but at the same time sometimes I will just push back, so that maybe next time when they just freely ask somebody, have you got
yeah.
kids, they might just think a bit differently. And I'm not trying to be that difficult person, but it's just that assumption of society that you're a woman of a certain age and you will just want kids and you'll want this and you'll go on and have that. I think it's just, it needs to change slightly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Personally, when you say I didn't, I don't mean to be a difficult person. You are not being a difficult person. I think by asking, by when someone asks you that, and whatever your situation is, whether you have POI or you just don't want children, whatever that is, and you just, politely say, you don't have, there's no need to be aggressive or whatever, let's face it, in society, that's just it's almost like a normal thing. Everyone has a right to ask, and they don't, but it's just, that's how it is. But there's nothing wrong with politely saying, look, I can't have kids because I
Yeah.
have X, Y, and Z, or
Yeah.
I actually don't want kids.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that will actually educate that person, and they will think twice about asking another woman, whether they're going to have children or not.
Yeah. And to be fair, like I think again, people as soon as you sometimes start those conversations, people are like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, tell me a bit more." And people,
Yeah.
but even I remember that on dating profiles, like so I'd come out of this relationship and I was putting myself back out there, and the basic things on the dating profiles are like sex, gender, job, do you want kids? And it's like, what happens if I don't want to put, because it's again, it's like, well, what do I put? Like, maybe I do, maybe I don't. But if I put I do, it's a bit more complicated than that. But there's no button for like it's complicated. And then
Mm.
again, I think when you get a bit older and you date, like sometimes first dates, some of the questions come up and like, so do you want a family? And it's difficult. And at first I was like, I don't need to share that. That's quite a personal thing.
Mm.
And the more comfortable I got with the fact that I am someone with POI who has fertility issues, I was like, well, this is me, and like so if the conversation came up, then I'll just tell people it's not this like, do you want kids? Well, maybe, but actually I can't. You know, it's a bit complicated. This is why, and people, I think once you kind of open up and talk, and to be fair, my partner at the moment, he's great. He was very understanding. He was incredible, and he was very much like, well, that was one of the things that attracted me to you was your transparency and openness, which is nice. And from
Mm.
there, we've built such a beautiful relationship with no secrets and no like
Yeah.
eyes. And he's so supportive of it and will talk to me about it. Like, because again, nobody really wants to talk to you about this when you've got friends and things and your friends start getting pregnant, and then there's almost like this taboo of like, god, we can't talk about pregnancy in front of her, and we can't mention this just in case it upsets her and stuff. And whereas he's the opposite, he'll just, if we've had a conversation about something, be like, are you okay, like how are you feeling about that, like did it upset you when you heard that news or something? And it's really nice
Mm.
to have someone you can just who
Yeah.
supportive but also will just have those honest conversations with you without any concern, because you don't want to miss out on conversations. Like you're happy for all of your friends and you want to be part of you want to celebrate with them. And it's a really, I think
Mm.
that's a difficult time as well, because you want to celebrate with them, but then sometimes it is a bit triggering and you're not even sure how you feel about it all. And it's, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of confusion around pregnancy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I guess on the other side of things, being someone that, if someone's your friend and perhaps maybe they have a family, how would how would they approach that? Because it's almost a case of, let's talk about the flip side, I
Yeah.
suppose. How would they approach um, thinking, oh, I don't want to make someone feel bad, and I don't know, should I tell them the news? Should I not? Or should I tell them that, we're having a party for my child or whatever?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming some of these thoughts go through people on the other side
Yeah.
that have friends that have POI or family members, and they don't know how to
Yeah.
approach it.
No, completely. And I think that's the people don't always know, they don't know what to say, which is completely understandable.
Yeah.
But then that ends up, you do end up a bit isolated at times. Uh,
Mm.
and again, like I think the fact that you don't know any, like it's not something, I think, I don't, I'm maybe generalizing, but as women, all your kind of milestones, all of your big life events, you talk to your friends about, don't you? Like periods,
Yeah.
talked about it, dating, like breakups, jobs, like whatever you're going through, you speak to your friends about it. And then it's one of those things, and normally you kind of all relate to each other and, oh yeah, when I went through this, that happened. And that's how you kind of build support. But for this, you're kind of, it's something that most of your friends have never been through and don't know. And even the menopause, like I'm sure in 10, 15, 20 years time, they'll all be talking about menopause and I'll be like, you know, been
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
yeah, I'm
Thank you
over
very
it.
much.
Stop talking. But it's just while you're going through it at the moment, you'll say things like, "Oh God, sorry, I forgot all of that brain fog," and of course they'll be understanding and be like, "Oh gosh, okay," but they won't. They just don't always. It's not the forefront of their mind.
Yeah.
I remember I was on a girls' trip last summer, and we were talking about going away like the year after. And there was a couple of our friends who just had babies, and they were like, "Oh my God, we can bring the babies on that trip." And I didn't really mean it. So like, without thinking, just, well, probably funny, but if the babies go, guys, I'm not going. And they all looked at me of like, I just, and then everyone got like quite offended. And it was only like, afterwards I was swimming with one of my friends in the sea, and she was like, "You okay?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, it's just, we've had that trip planned for a while, and it's just like, fine, for me, I just don't want that. I want that's about being with my friends, and as soon as we start bringing the children
Kids.
in,
Yeah.
it changes, and that's something we've all been looking forward to. And it's not that I'm against the kids, and I love the kids, and I love children, all of that, but it's just, for me, I need to almost like, what have I got? I need to almost celebrate the parts of that you're not having children. Like, okay, I can have a free life and I can do all of these things, and a child-free life, what do I get? So if you're then suddenly taking that away from me, it's just thinking, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that when you said it. And again, it's just that open conversation, but you just, because they're not in your head, they
Yeah.
don't really understand the things that you're going through. So I think, again, that can make it seem a bit isolating sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're right that that wherever you go, whether you're going for dinner or on holidays, whatever that might be, and you start bringing if some people have got children, for me, it's like, if I'm going out with my friends and then, we're having a girls' night out as an example, and then all of a sudden one of them says, "Oh, I'm bringing my child along," I'd be like, well, I mean, this is a girls' night out, not if we're doing a kids thing, then we'll all bring our kids, kind of thing. It's not like,
Yeah,
because it's just meant to be us, and we're meant to just chill out together and bond and talk about different things. And when kids are involved, it's a completely different scenario. Like, it absolutely is. So yeah, even, I mean, I can absolutely relate to what you're saying. There's a time and a place, and for me, going away without kids is bliss.
bit of you time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone needs a bit of that, to be honest. So I think I want to talk about, we mentioned that the long waiting lists, and to actually see someone to get diagnosed or even investigate to see what's going on. Now, as a woman, how can you advocate for better healthcare? And if you feel like something isn't quite right and you go to your GP or doctor with symptoms, some women are dismissed or not heard and not listened to. These are things I hear. And, I've experienced it myself as well. Not all the time, but like you say, I don't really want to put blame on, oh, it's the GPs, it's this and that, because like I said, if they're not educated about it in the first place, how can they possibly know?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not, yes. And I get you should be proactive in learning, but so how can women advocate for better healthcare and get seen to a lot quicker and diagnosed quicker?
I think I think it's really hard. I think it is really difficult, because you're almost having to advocate for yourself, and to advocate for yourself, you almost need a bit of knowledge. And there's things like the POI, there's the ESHRA guidelines as well, that are up-to-date guidelines on POI. So if you've got kind of something like that, nice guidelines as well to go in with, sometimes that helps. But it's just, it's hard, because I think we underestimate the health, like that, the dynamic in a healthcare situation as well. Like, if you go to your doctor, there's this power dynamic automatically, isn't there? And if you're even kind of people who would say they're really confident, as soon as you're put in that situation, you suddenly doubt yourself, or it's the power balance can be really dangerous, I think, sometimes, when maybe the healthcare professionals don't have the knowledge, and maybe you have a bit more knowledge on this than they do. And in all honesty, I don't know what the best way is. I think making sure that you do have knowledge behind you, and making sure that you have maybe a symptom log of your symptoms, so that you can present them with some facts and information, like, I've got these symptoms, it's been going on for this long, I've read this, this is what I think it might be. History, if your mum's gone through menopause a little bit early, if she had issues with fertility, it's things like that can be kind of clues that it might be happening. But again, I think it's hard. I think because women are maybe thinking about pregnancy and families later at the moment, just because society has changed, I think that maybe things like, and this is not scientifically proven, this is just me thinking off the top of my head, I think maybe POI will more people will find out they've got POI because we're having families later, and maybe when our grandparents were our age, maybe they had gone through some of the things, but they'd already got their family, so nobody really investigated it, and they were having bushes and no one cared because they were just crazy women who were having these crazy symptoms, but they're with. So it's really hard, I think, to just break all of those old stereotypical views of women, and we just have to make sure that we're informed, and we also just having some trust in yourself. Like, your body better than anybody else. If something's not right, like, I knew that I was having hot flushes, and I knew that they weren't quite like just a just a hormonal thing. Something didn't feel right, and your body. So if you do feel like something's going on, just go and see somebody, and they shouldn't have to go back and keep going back if it's not, if you don't see that right person. But unfortunately, I think it very much depends on who's on the other side of the table. Like, if you've got somebody who's willing to listen, then you're probably going to get further than somebody if you haven't. And that's why we need to try and educate doctors. We need to try and educate nurses, healthcare specialists, so that they're aware, so that it's not just down to you advocating for yourself. And because I think you can be the biggest advocate, but if somebody's going to put that wall up in front of you, it's really hard. But there are people out there who do want to listen, and there's healthcare professionals out there who want to help. So social media can find links, you can find specialists, and if you can just get that one person to kind of listen to you and help, then that might be what you need just to get on the right path to kind of the diagnosis and things as well. I don't know if that really answers.
No, of course. I know, with knowledge, you can do a lot, and you can always go with that knowledge and say, look, I know this, and I would like you to do something about it, rather than kind of go in there with no knowledge whatsoever and expecting the doctor to, and then coming home with some paracetamol or something like that, as an example. But, I wanted to ask about menstruation. Now, if you're on the pill, you're not going to be having a period anyway. And we talked about women wanting children a bit later now because of society and so on. So I'm assuming, it's a big generalization, but a lot of women that aren't ready to have children are probably going to be on the pill. So they're going to not know until they're ready to have a child in their 30s or 40s, whenever that might be, right? I just want to get across, like, either way, there's going to be some kind of fertility issues, and either way, is it going to be where there's issues with your menstruation, so where you're not having periods at all anyway?
So I mean, if you're on the progesterone pill, you won't have periods at all. But if you're on the combined pill, which is the one I was on, you do actually get a withdrawal bleed, but it's almost like a fake period. So I was having very light withdrawal bleeds and just assumed that actually, I just have light periods, I'm really lucky. Whereas actually maybe that was a sign that things were. It is really hard because you don't know until you come off the pill, and you're just, all the hormones are out of your body. You don't know what your own natural hormones are doing, and I'm not sure what the answer to that is. And maybe once we kind of put more into women's healthcare and we start, they're talking about, I think it was Australia that are talking about AMH, which is one of the blood tests you can get, and that they're talking about possibly being able to predict the age of your menopause or something based on this blood test. And that's all very like futuristic and kind of they're wondering whether or not they can do that, and they're looking at it at the moment. So maybe with time there will be more tests out there, there'll be more ways that we can see kind of predict these things in women. And I think family history is quite a big thing. Like, after speaking to my mum, I think my mum went through menopause not early like my kind of time, but she was a bit earlier, and then you speak and you kind of talk about, oh, well, maybe your grandma, actually, she was maybe going through the menopause in her. And so I think sometimes family history can be, and again, it's just having those conversations, because people didn't talk about, like, my grandma was never going to talk about the menopause
No.
because no one cared. That wasn't, you're a woman, no one cares about these things. So I think as women start to get more of a voice generally in society and start to advocate more for themselves, then hopefully we'll get more research and we'll get more kind of money put into finding these answers. And
Yeah. Is there any current research on why people get POI, like the causes of it? And
so there's different causes. There's so 10%, which is what I've got, are idiopathic, so we just don't know why you've got it. It's spontaneous, we're not sure. So that's what I kind of come under. But there's genetic causes, so people who've got Turner syndrome, particularly, they can get POI. There's autoimmune causes as well, so when the different autoimmune diseases, when your body cells kind of start fighting against their own cells, that can cause it. Cancer treatment can lead to POI, so people who'd had chemotherapy, that can induce it. And then you've got surgical menopause, so when people have had their ovaries removed for whatever reason, that can induce POI as well. So there's some known causes, but then there's about 10% of people where it's just, we're not sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the specialists at the time was like, it could be like pollution, it could be stress, it could be this, it could be that. And then you start like looking back, being like, oh my God, was it because I moved to London? Like, should I have stayed in the countryside? Have I done this to myself? And like, is it because I'm stressed all the time? But then I suppose that's the thing with so many women's health conditions, even menopause and stuff. It's like a lot of the symptoms are not vague, but there's, tired, lethargic, low energy, like stressed, and you're like, well, is that this, or is that just because work's a bit stressful at the moment? And it's like, there's so many, I think that's what makes diagnosis so hard, is that so many of the symptoms can be so many other things. And again, as women, we've been dismissed for so long, haven't we? Like, oh God, she's tired again, or oh, she's just a bit emotional, and it's roll of the eye. No, it's only now that people are starting to actually give us any kind of credit for that, which is long overdue.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're being blamed for having these hormones.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, this is our genetic makeup. This is what women are. And
it's such a bugbear about like the whole, like, you're weak if you show emotion, that kind of, like, oh God, you're being over emotional, or I think honestly it shows so much strength to actually be emotional and share that emotion, that it just, like, people get shamed for all of that, and it just yes, very big bugbear.
Well, Siobhan, thank you so much for sharing your journey and some insights on POI. I really hope that it's been useful for my audience. And also, if anyone is interested, you can purchase Siobhan's book. It's, talks through her journey. It's available on wherever you buy your books.
Amazon.
There you go. Thank you so much, Siobhan, for sharing.
No, thank you so much, and thank you for having the opportunity to speak about it, because I think it's such a privilege to be able to talk to about POI and also share it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And I'll be, all your details are going to be in the show notes, where they can connect with you on your Instagram, and obviously through your book as well.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you. Thank you, Siobhan.